I never thought seeing my son happy would fill me with such dread. But there she was at Sunday dinner, laughing at his jokes with that same bright smile she'd worn 5 years ago when she told me my biopsy results had been misplaced. The same woman who'd vanished when I needed answers most. Now she was holding my son's hand across my dining table, and neither of them had any idea I recognized her. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Katherine Morelli, and at 58 years old, I've learned that some coincidences are too cruel to be accidental. I stood in my kitchen doorway that October evening, gripping a serving platter so hard my knuckles went white, watching this woman pretend we'd never met before. She changed her hair from dark brown to honey blonde, and she'd lost maybe 20 pounds. But I would know those green eyes anywhere. They were the last thing I'd seen before my world collapsed into a nightmare of uncertainty and fear. Let me take you back to where this really begins. Because you need to understand what this woman took from me before you can understand why seeing her with my son felt like being stabbed all over again. 5 years ago, I was living what I thought was a perfectly ordinary life in Richmond. Working as a high school English teacher, raising my son, Daniel, on my own after my husband left us when Daniel was 12. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I had my small brick house with the garden I tended every weekend. My classroom full of teenagers who occasionally pretended to care about Shakespeare, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing I built something stable despite everything. Then one morning in March, I found the lump. I was getting dressed for work, and there it was, hard and unmistakable beneath my fingertips. My grandmother had died of breast cancer when I was young, so I knew immediately what it might mean. I called my doctor that same day, my hands shaking so badly I could barely dial the number. They got me in within a week, which should have been reassuring, but instead just amplified my terror. Fast-track appointments mean they're worried, too. The mammogram led to an ultrasound, which led to a biopsy. I remember lying on that cold table, trying not to cry while they inserted the needle, thinking about Daniel and how he'd already lost his father to abandonment. What would happen to him if he lost me, too? He was 17, almost ready for college, but still so young. Still my baby, even if he towered over me now and got embarrassed when I called him that. The doctor who performed the biopsy was kind but professional. She explained that results typically took 3 to 5 business days and that someone from the office would call me as soon as they came in. She squeezed my shoulder before I left and told me to try not to worry, which was like telling the ocean not to have waves. I spent those next days in a fog of anxiety, jumping every time my phone rang, unable to focus on anything else. But the call never came. 5 business days passed, then 6, then 7. On day 8, I called the office myself, my voice tight with stress. The receptionist put me on hold for what felt like an eternity before coming back with confusion in her voice. She couldn't find any results in my file. Could I hold while she checked with the lab? Another eternity. Then she returned to tell me she'd have the nurse call me back. That's when I first spoke to Jessica Hendris, though she introduced herself as just Jessica, warm and apologetic. She explained that there seemed to be some confusion about my samples, that they were checking with the lab to see if perhaps there had been a labeling error. These things happen sometimes, she assured me. Nothing to panic about. They'd sort it out and call me back by end of day. End of day came and went. I called again the next morning, and this time Jessica's voice had an edge of frustration that somehow made me feel like I was the one causing problems. She said the lab was still investigating, that my samples appeared to have been logged incorrectly or possibly contaminated. They might need to redo the biopsy. Redo the biopsy. Go through that fear and pain again because of someone else's mistake. I felt something break inside me, but I held it together. I asked to speak to the doctor, to someone who could give me real answers. Jessica promised the doctor would call me back. She never did. This pattern continued for 2 weeks. Me calling increasingly desperate and afraid. Jessica making promises that went unkempt. Offering explanations that didn't quite make sense. The samples were lost. No, they were found, but the results were inconclusive. No, they needed to be retested. No, there was a computer error. Every day was a new story, a new excuse, and underneath it all was the growing certainty that something was very wrong. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I lost 12 pounds in those 2 weeks. And my principal pulled me aside to ask if everything was okay because I'd started crying in the middle of teaching MCBTH. How could I explain that I was living in a nightmare of not knowing, of waiting for a phone call that would tell me if I was dying while the people who were supposed to help me couldn't even keep track of my medical samples? Daniel noticed, of course. He'd come home from school and find me sitting at the kitchen table staring at my phone, and he'd get this look on his face that made him seem much older than 17. He'd ask if I'd heard anything yet, and I'd have to tell him, no, not yet. Soon though, trying to sound confident when inside I was screaming. On the 15th day after my biopsy, I drove to the medical office without calling first. I walked past the receptionist, ignoring her protests, and demanded to see someone who could actually tell me what had happened to my test results. The office manager came out, a thin woman with tired eyes who looked genuinely distressed by my situation. She pulled up my file on her computer right there in the hallway, scrolling and clicking, her frown deepening. Your samples were marked as disposed of improperly, she said finally. According to the notes, they were contaminated and couldn't be processed, but there's no documentation of anyone informing you of this, and there should have been an immediate order for a new biopsy. I don't understand why this wasn't handled correctly. She looked at me with something close to pity and said the words that changed everything. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Morelli. This is unacceptable. We'll get you scheduled for a new biopsy immediately, and we'll waive all fees. But I have to be honest with you. We've lost valuable time here. If there is something malignant, 2 weeks can make a significant difference. 2 weeks potentially life-altering, life-ending 2 weeks. Loss because someone couldn't do their job properly. I asked about Jessica, the nurse who'd been giving me the runaround. The office manager's expression shifted to something carefully neutral. Jessica is no longer with our practice, she said. She left rather suddenly last week. We're still trying to sort through some of the cases she was handling. Left suddenly, no forwarding information, no way to hold her accountable for what she'd done or failed to do. Just gone, vanished like my test results, leaving me with nothing but more fear and more questions. The second biopsy showed atypical cells that required a third biopsy and eventually a lumpectomy. By the time we got to actual treatment, we'd lost nearly 2 months. The cancer had been caught relatively early despite everything, but those lost weeks haunted me. The oncologist tried to reassure me that it probably hadn't made a significant difference in the long term, but the probably felt like a knife between my ribs. Probably meant maybe. Maybe meant I'd never really know if Jessica's incompetence or negligence or whatever it was had cost me months or years of my life. I tried to file a complaint, but the medical board investigation went nowhere. Without concrete proof that Jessica had intentionally mishandled my case, without her present to answer questions, there was nothing they could do. The practice settled with me quietly. A sum of money that barely covered my medical bills and definitely didn't compensate for the trauma of those weeks spent in limbo. I went through treatment angry. Angry through the radiation that left burn marks on my skin. Angry through the hormone therapy that threw me into early menopause. Angry through every follow-up scan where I held my breath waiting to hear if the cancer had come back. Daniel would sit with me during chemotherapy sessions that thankfully were mild, holding my hand, trying to make jokes to distract me. And I could see the fear in his eyes every time. Fear that I'd put there because Jessica Hendris couldn't be bothered to do her job correctly. But time passed as it does. The cancer didn't return. Daniel graduated high school and went to college at Virginia Tech, studying engineering. I went back to teaching, went back to tending my garden, went back to building my small, careful life. The anger faded into something more manageable, a dull ache rather than a sharp pain. I stopped thinking about Jessica every day, then every week, then only occasionally when something triggered the memory. 5 years. 5 years of clear scans and normal checkups, and slowly learning to trust my body again. 5 years of watching Daniel grow into an incredible young man, graduating college, getting a job at a tech firm in Charlottesville. 5 years of healing, of moving forward, of believing that the worst was behind me. And then Daniel called me 3 months ago, his voice bubbling with excitement. "Mom, I met someone. Her name is Emma, and I really think you're going to love her. She's smart and funny, and she works as a nurse at the university hospital. We've been dating for about 2 months now, and I want you to meet her." A nurse. My stomach had clenched at the word, but I pushed the reaction down. Not all nurses were careless. Not all medical professionals would abandon a patient in crisis. Daniel was happy, and that's what mattered. I told him I couldn't wait to meet her, and I meant it. I wanted my son to find love, to build a life with someone who deserved him. We set a date for dinner at my house. Daniel offered to take us out to a restaurant, but I insisted on cooking. I wanted to welcome this woman properly, to show her that she was entering a family that valued connection and care. I spent all day Saturday preparing Daniel's favorite foods, lasagna and garlic bread, and the chocolate cake I'd made for every one of his birthdays. I set the table with my good dishes, put fresh flowers in a vase, made sure everything was perfect. They arrived at 6 o'clock, and I heard them laughing together as they came up the walkway. My heart was full, ready to embrace whoever had made my son sound so joyful. I opened the door with a smile, and that's when my world tilted sideways. She was thinner and blonde instead of brunette, dressed in a casual sundress instead of scrubs, but I knew her instantly. Those green eyes, that smile, the slight gap between her front teeth. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So, if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Jessica Hendris was standing on my doorstep, holding my son's hand, calling herself Emma Chase. I must have frozen because Daniel touched my arm with concern. "Mom, are you okay?" I forced myself to breathe, to smile, to step back, and let them in. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe it was just someone who looked like her. 5 years was a long time, and I'd only seen Jessica a handful of times, always in the context of that nightmare. Maybe trauma had twisted my memories, made me see threats where none existed. But as she stepped into my house, she looked directly at me, and I saw it. A flicker of recognition quickly suppressed. A moment of calculation behind those green eyes. She knew exactly who I was, and she'd known from the moment Daniel first mentioned his mother's name. She'd known, and she'd said nothing. "Katherine, it's so wonderful to finally meet you," she said, extending her hand. "Daniel has told me so much about you." Her voice was exactly as I remembered, warm and confident. The same voice that had made excuses and empty promises while I spiraled into panic. I took her hand because what else could I do with my son watching eagerly, me said, testing the name. "Welcome." The evening was surreal. I moved through the motions of serving dinner, making conversation, listening to Daniel tell stories about how they met at a hospital charity event. Emma sat at my table eating my food, laughing at my jokes, playing the role of the perfect girlfriend, meeting her boyfriend's mother for the first time. She asked me about teaching, about my garden, about how I'd managed as a single mother. All the right questions, all the appropriate interest, and not once did she acknowledge that we'd met before. Not once did she slip and reveal that she knew things about me that Daniel hadn't told her. She was careful, controlled, and utterly convincing. I watched her interact with Daniel, saw the way he looked at her with such open affection, and I felt sick. This woman who had caused me such anguish, who had abandoned me when I was most vulnerable, who had disappeared rather than face the consequences of her negligence, was now inserted into my life in the most intimate way possible. She was dating my son. She was potentially going to become part of my family permanently. After dinner, they offered to help clean up, but I shooed them into the living room, needing a moment alone to collect myself. I stood at the sink, hands submerged in soapy water, trying to figure out what to do. Should I tell Daniel right now, pull him aside, and explain that his girlfriend was the nurse who'd mishandled my cancer diagnosis? But what if I was wrong? What if it was just an incredible, horrible coincidence that this woman looked exactly like Jessica Hendris? I dried my hands and pulled out my phone, searching for Jessica Hendricks, nurse, Richmond, Virginia. Nothing came up. I tried different variations, different search terms. Finally, I found an old staff directory from the medical practice archived on some healthcare website. There she was, Jessica Marie Hendris, RN. The photo was small and slightly blurry, but it was definitely her, and it was definitely the woman sitting in my living room. I went back to join them, and Emma was showing Daniel something on her phone. Both of them laughing. She looked up as I entered and our eyes met. For just a second, her smile faltered. She knew that I knew, and yet she said nothing, just patted the couch beside her. Come sit with us, Katherine. We were just looking at photos from the hiking trip Daniel and I took last weekend. I sat. I looked at the photos. I smiled and nodded and acted like everything was fine while my mind raced through possibilities and implications. Why was she using a different name? Why had she approached my son in the first place? Was this some kind of sick coincidence, or had she somehow sought him out deliberately? They left around 9 o'clock and Daniel hugged me tight at the door. She's amazing, right, Mom? I can tell you really liked her. I hugged him back and lied through my teeth. She seems lovely, sweetheart. I'm so happy for you. After they left, I sat alone in my kitchen for hours. That serving platter still on the counter where I gripped it so hard when I first recognized her. I had a choice to make, and every option felt like it led to disaster. If I told Daniel the truth, would he believe me? Would he think I was being paranoid or possessive trying to sabotage his relationship? And even if he did believe me, what then? He was clearly falling in love with this woman. Telling him would break his heart. But if I said nothing, if I let this play out, what happened when she inevitably hurt him the way she'd hurt me? What happened when her carelessness or selfishness or whatever darkness lived inside her turned toward my son instead of me? Could I stand by and watch him get destroyed by someone I knew was dangerous? I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, remembering those weeks of terror 5 years ago. The way Jessica's voice had sounded, making promises she never kept. I thought about the office manager saying she'd left suddenly. No forwarding information. People don't usually vanish from jobs without reason. What had she done that made her need to disappear? And why had she resurfaced now with a new name and my son on her arm? By morning, I'd made my decision. I needed to know more before I acted. I needed to understand what I was really dealing with, because if I was going to potentially destroy my son's happiness and damage our relationship, I needed to be absolutely certain I was doing it for the right reasons. I started digging carefully and quietly. I hired a private investigator, a woman named Sandra Kim, who came highly recommended by a teacher friend who'd used her during a contentious divorce. I told Sandra everything, gave her both names, described the situation. I could see the concern in her eyes as she took notes. "This is delicate," she said. "If your son finds out you're investigating his girlfriend, it could cause serious problems. Are you sure you want to go down this road?" I'm sure I told her because whatever else happens, I need to know the truth. Sandra promised to be discreet and thorough. She started with the basics: employment history, address records, any public information available. Within a week, she called me with preliminary findings that made my blood run cold. Emma Chase didn't exist before 4.5 years ago. The name appeared suddenly with a new nursing license in North Carolina. A new address, a complete life that materialized out of nowhere right around the time Jessica Hendricks vanished from Richmond. Same birth date, same nursing school graduation year, but different social security number, different employment history before the name change. She legally changed her identity. Sandra explained, "It's not illegal if done properly through the courts, but it's unusual. Most people who do this are either fleeing domestic violence or trying to escape debt or legal trouble. Given the timing with her departure from that medical practice, I'd guess it's the latter." "Can you find out why she left?" I asked. "Was there an investigation? Was she fired?" Sandra said she'd try, but medical employment records were tricky. She'd need to talk to people, dig through court records, see what she could uncover. It would take time and money. I told her to keep going. Over the next month, the pieces started coming together. And each one made me feel more justified in my suspicions and more terrified for my son. Jessica Hendris, now Emma Chase, had worked at 3 different medical facilities before the practice where she'd handled my case. At each one, she'd left under murky circumstances. Sandra couldn't get specifics because of privacy laws and sealed settlements, but the pattern was clear. Short employment periods, sudden departures, gaps in her resume that suggested she was being forced out. The medical practice where I'd been her patient had settled not just with me, but with at least 2 other patients for similar issues around the same time period. Mishandled lab work, missing test results, communication failures. Sandra found references to these cases in court databases. Though the details were sealed, Jessica had been at the center of all of them. But here was the thing that chilled me most. After she became Emma Chase, her record was spotless. 4 years at a hospital in Asheville with glowing reviews, then a transfer to the University Hospital in Charlottesville 8 months ago. Excellent performance evaluations, patient satisfaction scores, no complaints. It was like she'd become a completely different person, or like she'd finally learned to be better at hiding her mistakes. I thought about that constantly as fall progressed and Daniel's relationship with Emma deepened. They were together constantly, and he'd bring her to Sunday dinners at my house every couple of weeks. Each time I'd watch her carefully, looking for cracks in the facade. She was always perfect, always charming, always attentive to Daniel in ways that seemed genuine. She'd help clean up without being asked, remember details I'd mentioned in passing, ask thoughtful questions about my students and my life. And she never, not once, gave any indication that she recognized me as anything other than her boyfriend's mother. It was gaslighting on a profound level. I knew she knew and she knew. I knew she knew, but we both played our parts. Me as the welcoming mother, her as the sweet girlfriend. Daniel was completely oblivious to the tension, seeing only what he wanted to see. 2 of the most important women in his life getting along beautifully. I started having nightmares again, the same kind I'd had during those weeks waiting for my test results. Dreams where I was trying to warn Daniel about something terrible, but my voice wouldn't work. Dreams where Emma smiled at me while holding a syringe filled with something dark. Dreams where I found out my cancer had returned and Emma was my nurse losing my test results all over again. My doctor, noticing my weight loss and the dark circles under my eyes during a routine checkup, asked if I was under unusual stress. I wanted to tell her everything, but how could I explain that the source of my stress was sitting in Sunday dinners pretending to be someone she wasn't? Instead, I said work was demanding and left with a prescription for sleeping pills I never filled. By December, Daniel started hinting about more serious commitment. He told me over coffee one Saturday morning that he thought Emma might be the one, that he couldn't imagine his future without her. My son, my brilliant, kind, trusting son, was falling completely in love with a woman who'd proven she couldn't be trusted with someone's life. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab him by the shoulders and shake him until he understood the danger he was in. But I had no proof of current wrongdoing, only a history that she'd literally changed her identity to escape. If I told him what I knew, would it save him or just drive him away from me? Sandra called me a week before Christmas with information that finally gave me something concrete. She tracked down a nurse who'd worked with Jessica at the practice where my case was mishandled. The woman, now retired, had been willing to talk off the record. According to this nurse, Jessica had been brilliant but careless. Someone who cut corners when she thought no one was watching. She'd had a pattern of not following up on important tasks, of assuming someone else would catch her mistakes. The problems with my case and the others weren't isolated incidents. They were the culmination of months of sloppy practices that administration had been too understaffed to notice until patients started complaining. But here's what really mattered. When the office manager started investigating, Jessica had lied. She'd falsified documentation to cover her tracks, made it look like she'd followed proper procedures when she hadn't. That's why she'd left suddenly. She'd been given the choice to resign or be fired and reported to the nursing board. She'd chosen to resign, change her name, and start fresh somewhere she wouldn't be recognized. She's a good liar, the retired nurse told Sandra. She could look you in the eye and tell you black was white, and you'd almost believe her. That's what made her dangerous. Not incompetence exactly, but this ability to make you doubt your own perceptions. I thought about all the Sunday dinners, all the times Emma had sat at my table lying by omission. The retired nurse was right. Emma was an excellent liar. Christmas came and Daniel asked if Emma could join us for dinner. Of course, I said, because what else could I say? I cooked a feast, decorated my house, bought Emma a carefully chosen gift, a beautiful scarf that probably cost more than I should have spent. I played my part perfectly. She gave me a gift, too. A first edition of one of my favorite novels with a sweet note about how Daniel had told her I collected old books. It was thoughtful, personal, exactly the kind of gift that should have made me like her. Instead, it felt like she was mocking me, showing how well she could play this game. After dinner, she insisted on helping with dishes while Daniel built a fire in the living room. We stood side by side at the sink, just like that first night. And for several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then she turned to me, her voice low. "You have a wonderful son, Katherine. He's one of the best men I've ever known." I kept washing the plate in my hands, not trusting myself to look at her. "He is. He deserves to be happy, don't you think?" The question hung in the air between us, loaded with meaning. I set down the plate carefully. Everyone deserves to be happy, but happiness built on lies never lasts. She paused, her hand stilling in the dishwater. "Is there something you want to say to me?" This was it. The moment where I could confront her, force the truth into the open. But Daniel was in the next room, happy and content, believing his life was falling into place. If I shattered that illusion now on Christmas, would he ever forgive me? "I just want what's best for my son," I said finally. "I hope you do too." She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Of course I do. We both want Daniel to be happy. That's what we have in common, isn't it? We both love him." The implication was clear. If I exposed her, I'd hurt Daniel. She was betting that I loved my son too much to cause him pain, even if it meant protecting him from her. She was right, but not in the way she thought. I did love Daniel too much to hurt him unnecessarily. But I also loved him too much to let someone dangerous destroy him from the inside out. After they left that night, I sat in my living room surrounded by torn wrapping paper and the remains of Christmas dinner. And I made a decision. I was going to tell Daniel everything. Not to punish Emma or get revenge for what she'd done to me, but because he deserved to know who he was building his life with. He deserved to make an informed choice about his future. But I would do it carefully, strategically. I would present facts, not emotions. I would give him evidence, not just my word against hers. I would trust him to be smart enough to see the truth once it was in front of him. Sandra had compiled everything into a report, complete with documentation, timelines, testimony from the retired nurse. It was thorough, damning, and undeniable. I planned to give it to Daniel in January after the holidays when we could have a serious conversation without the pressure of family celebrations. But Emma must have sensed something changing. She must have realized that our silent standoff couldn't last forever. That eventually I would force the truth into the open because on New Year's Eve, everything exploded in a way I never could have predicted. Daniel called me that evening, his voice tight with anger. "Mom, I need to talk to you. Can I come over right now?" My heart sank. "Of course, sweetheart. What's wrong?" "I'll tell you when I get there." He arrived 20 minutes later and I could see immediately that he'd been crying. My strong, composed son had tears streaking his face and his hands were shaking. I pulled him inside terrified. Had something happened to Emma? Had there been an accident? But when he finally spoke, his words were worse than anything I'd imagined. "Emma told me everything he said about her past, about what happened with you, about why she changed her name. Mom, how could you not tell me? How could you let me fall in love with her while knowing all of this and saying nothing?" The world tilted. She'd beaten me to it. She told him first and now she got to control the narrative. "Daniel," I started, but he cut me off. She came to me tonight crying, saying she couldn't live with the guilt anymore. She told me about the mistake she made when she was younger, about how she lost your test results and tried to cover it up. She told me she's been terrified since the first time she met you that you'd remember her, that you'd turn me against her. She told him Emma had confessed, but on her terms with her spin, painting herself as the reformed sinner who'd found redemption through hard work and honesty. And my son, my beautiful trusting son, was looking at me like I was the villain for keeping secrets. I sat down slowly trying to gather my thoughts. Daniel, it's more complicated than whatever she told you. Is it? His voice cracked because it seems pretty simple to me. You recognized her that first night, didn't you? You knew exactly who she was and you said nothing. You let me introduce her as this new person in my life. You let me talk about how happy I was. And the whole time you were sitting on this information. I was trying to protect you, I said, but the words sounded weak even to my own ears. Protect me from what? From someone who made mistakes years ago and has spent every day since trying to be better. He was pacing now, his movements agitated. She showed me her performance reviews. Mom, 4 years of perfect evaluations, patient testimonials about how caring and competent she is. She's not the same person who mishandled your case. Did she tell you she falsified records to cover up her mistakes? I asked quietly. Did she tell you she was given the choice to resign or be reported to the nursing board? Did she tell you there were multiple patients, not just me, who suffered because of her negligence? He stopped pacing. She told me she made errors in documentation when she was overwhelmed and inexperienced. She told me she resigned because she knew she needed to work on herself before she could be the kind of nurse patients deserved. She went to therapy, took additional training courses, changed everything about how she approached her work, and changed her name to escape the consequences. I added Daniel. People who are truly reformed don't run from their past. They face it and make amends. Maybe she couldn't face it back then. He shot back. Maybe she needed distance to become better. People change, Mom. Or do you not believe anyone can grow past their mistakes? The question hit me hard because of course I believed in redemption. I'd built my entire career on the idea that young people could learn and grow past their errors. But this felt different. This felt calculated. I believe people can change, I said carefully. But I also believe that someone who enters your life while hiding a significant connection to your family is showing you exactly who they are. She knew from the start that I was your mother. She had opportunities every single day for months to tell you the truth, and she chose deception instead. She was scared, he said, but there was less certainty in his voice now. She thought you'd poison me against her before she had a chance to show me who she really is. Or she knew that if you found out the truth, you'd ask questions she didn't want to answer. I stood and walked to where I'd hidden Sandra's report in my desk drawer. I've been investigating her, Daniel. I know that sounds terrible, but I needed to understand what we were really dealing with. You investigated my girlfriend? His voice rose. You hired someone to dig into her past. I hired someone to find the truth I corrected. And what I found was a pattern, not a single mistake. Multiple facilities, multiple departures, always under questionable circumstances. I held out the folder, but he didn't take it. His face had gone pale, and I couldn't tell if it was anger or fear. She told me, you might have done something like this, he said slowly. She said, you might try to dig up her past and use it against her. She said, people who've been hurt sometimes hurt others, even when they don't mean to. The manipulation of it took my breath away. Emma had prepared him for exactly this moment, had laid the groundwork to make me look like the unreasonable one. She positioned herself as the vulnerable victim of my vendetta, and Daniel was buying it. Look at the report, I pleaded. Just look at the facts and then decide for yourself. He took the folder but didn't open it. I'll read it, he said. But Mom, I need you to understand something. I love her. I'm in love with Emma, and whether you approve or not, whether you forgive her or not, I'm going to be with her. Even if it destroys you. The question came out before I could stop it. His eyes filled with tears again. Why does it have to destroy anything? Why can't you just let the past stay in the past? She's sorry for what happened to you. She carries guilt about it every single day, but she's also a different person now, and she makes me happier than I've ever been. I wanted to shake him, to make him see that happiness built on lies was just a prettier cage. But he was an adult, not a child I could protect through sheer force of will. All I could do was give him the information and trust him to make the right choice. Read the report, I said again, and then we'll talk. Really talk. Not like this. He left without hugging me. Something he'd never done before. I watched him walk to his carrying that folder. And I felt like I was watching him walk away from me entirely. Emma had gotten to him first, had shaped the narrative, had positioned herself as the one being persecuted rather than the one who'd done harm. It was masterful. Really despicable, but masterful. I didn't sleep that night either. I kept checking my phone, hoping Daniel would call after reading the report, after seeing the documented pattern of behavior that showed Emma's problems went far deeper than a few mistakes made under stress. But the call never came. New Year's Day dawned grey and cold, matching my mood perfectly. I planned to spend it grading papers and meal prepping for the week. Normal activities that would make me feel grounded. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table drinking coffee and staring at my phone, willing it to ring. Finally did, but it wasn't Daniel. It was Sandra. "I'm sorry to bother you on a holiday," she said. "But something came up that I thought you should know about immediately." My stomach clenched. "What is it?" "I've been monitoring some things related to Emma Chase. Just keeping an eye on public records and social media. Last night, she posted something on a private Facebook group for nurses. It's supposedly a closed group, but I have a contact who's a member. The post is about dealing with difficult family dynamics when you have a complicated past. She's talking about me." I said it wasn't a question. She doesn't use names, but the details make it clear. She's describing a situation where her boyfriend's mother can't forgive past mistakes and is actively trying to sabotage their relationship. The responses are exactly what you'd expect. Lots of support, lots of comments about toxic parents who can't let go. Advice about setting boundaries. So, she's building a narrative. I said, gathering witnesses to her version of events. "It's more than that," Sandra said. One of the responses is from someone who claims to have worked with her in Asheville. The comment says something like, "You're so strong for overcoming your past. Not everyone could rebuild the way you have." I reached out to my contact to see if they could get me in touch with this person, and they were willing to talk, but only off the record. "Katherine, this person says Emma didn't just make mistakes in her previous positions. She had a pattern of getting involved in boundary violations with patients and their families. Nothing illegal, but ethically murky. Getting too close, sharing too much personal information, creating dependencies." I felt cold all over. "You think she's doing that with Daniel? Using him somehow?" "I think she's very good at finding vulnerable people and making herself indispensable to them," Sandra said carefully. "Daniel lost his father at a formative age, was raised by a single mother who then went through cancer treatment. He's probably got some deep-seated fears about losing people he loves. Emma is smart enough to recognize that and use it. But she genuinely seems to care about him," I protested, even though I wasn't sure why I was defending her. "I'm sure she does in her way. People like this often convince themselves they have good intentions. But caring about someone and being healthy for them aren't the same thing." After I hung up, I sat with that information trying to decide what to do with it. If I told Daniel that Emma had a pattern of boundary violations, would he hear it as legitimate concern or just more evidence of my bias against her? She'd already framed me as the bitter, unforgiving mother. Anything else I said would just confirm that narrative in his mind. The week between New Year's and the start of spring semester was torture. Daniel didn't call or text. I tried reaching out twice, but got only brief responses. "Reading your report, need time to process." And then 2 days later, "Need space right now. Mom, please respect that space." The word every parent dreads. The one that means I'm pulling away from you. I gave him the space he asked for, but it felt like dying slowly. Classes started and I threw myself into teaching with an intensity that probably alarmed my students. I over-prepared every lesson, stayed late for extra help sessions, volunteered for committees I'd normally avoid. Anything to keep my mind occupied, to avoid the silence of my house and the absence of my son. 3 weeks into January, Daniel finally called. His voice was strained but calmer than it had been on New Year's Eve. "Mom, can we talk in person?" "Of course." "When?" "Tonight. I can come over after work. I'll make dinner." I offered, desperate to do something normal. Something that felt like the relationship we used to have. "Just coffee is fine. I'm not staying long." That hurt more than I wanted to admit, but I agreed. He arrived at 7 looking exhausted. There were dark circles under his eyes and he'd lost weight. My immediate instinct was to feed him, fuss over him, make sure he was taking care of himself. But I forced myself to just pour coffee and sit down across from him at the kitchen table. "I read your report," he said without preamble multiple times. "And I talked to Emma about everything in it." I waited, hardly breathing. She admits that her work history before Asheville was problematic. She admits she made serious mistakes and didn't handle them well, but she also showed me documentation of the work she's done since then. Therapy records, additional training certificates, every performance evaluation from the past 4 years. She's been completely transparent. Transparent except for the part where she hid who she was when she met you. I couldn't help saying. He flinched. "I know that part bothers me too." But she explained that she panicked when she realized who you were. She thought if she came clean immediately, I'd end things before she had a chance to prove herself. She thought she could find the right moment to tell both of us. "And when was that moment going to be?" I asked. "After you got engaged? After you got married? When exactly was she planning to reveal that she had this connection to our family?" "She was scared," he repeated. But there was doubt in his voice now. "I know that's not an excuse. I know she should have told me right away. But Mom, I also think maybe you should have told me right away. You had the same opportunity to be honest and you chose to wait too." The comparison stung because there was truth in it. I had waited, had kept my own secrets, had let the charade continue. But my motivation had been protecting him, not protecting myself. "You're right. I admit it. I should have told you that first night. I was trying to figure out the best way to handle it and I made the wrong choice. I'm sorry for that." He looked surprised by my apology and some of the tension left his shoulders. "Thank you for saying that." We sat in silence for a moment, both of us sipping coffee and not quite meeting each other's eyes. "So what now?" I asked finally. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to try," he said. "Give Emma a real chance. Get to know who she is now, not who she was 5 years ago. She's willing to sit down with you to answer any questions you have to try to rebuild trust between you. And if I can't, if I try and still feel like she's not right for you," his jaw tightened, "then I'll have to accept that my mother and my girlfriend don't get along. It won't be ideal, but it won't change how I feel about her. So, I've already lost," I thought. No matter what happens from here, Emma wins. Either I accept her and she becomes part of my family, or I reject her and lose my son in the process. "I'll try," I said, "because what else could I say for you?" "I'll try." Relief flooded his face. "Thank you, Mom. That's all I'm asking." He left shortly after, and I sat alone again in my kitchen, feeling like I just agreed to let a wolf into my fold because the sheep I loved most had bonded with it. But Daniel was an adult, and I couldn't protect him from his own choices. All I could do was be there to help pick up the pieces if everything fell apart the way I feared it would. The meeting Emma requested happened a week later at a neutral location. A quiet coffee shop downtown that was usually empty on weekday afternoons. Daniel came with her, positioning himself as the mediator between us. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. He was already seeing this as a conflict between 2 equal parties, not a situation where one person had seriously wronged the other. Emma looked nervous, which was interesting. In all our previous interactions, she'd been composed and confident. But today, facing me in a situation where honesty was supposedly the goal, she seemed genuinely anxious. "Katherine, thank you for agreeing to meet with me," she started. "I know this is difficult for you." "It is," I said evenly, "but I'm here because Daniel asked me to be, and I respect his judgment even when I don't understand his choices." Her lips tightened slightly at that bob, but she continued, "I want to start by saying, I'm sorry for what happened with your test results, for the fear and pain I caused you, for not being a better nurse when you needed one." The apology sounded rehearsed, but I nodded. "Thank you for saying that. I also want to explain why I didn't tell Daniel who I was from the beginning." She glanced at him, and he gave her an encouraging nod. "When I first met you at that dinner, I genuinely didn't recognize you immediately. It had been 5 years and I tried hard to put that whole period of my life behind me. But then you looked at me and I saw the recognition in your eyes and I panicked. You panicked, so you decided to lie by omission for months. I kept my voice level, but the anger was there underneath. I know it was wrong. She said I should have pulled you aside that night or called you the next day. But I was terrified. Terrified that I'd lose Daniel before he really knew me. Terrified that my past mistakes would define me forever. No matter how hard I'd work to become better. Your past mistakes put me through hell," I said quietly. "Do you understand that? Not just the medical part, but the weeks of gaslighting, of being told my samples were lost and then found and then contaminated and then who knows what. Every time I called for answers, you fed me lies and excuses. That wasn't just a mistake. That was cruelty." She flinched and tears filled her eyes. "I know, God. Katherine, I know. I was in over my head, and instead of admitting it, I tried to cover up, and it just got worse and worse. I've spent 5 years living with the guilt of what I did to you and the other patients. I failed. Have you reached out to apologize to any of them?" I asked. "Have you tried to make amends beyond just changing your name and moving on?" The question seemed to catch her off guard. "I wrote letters to all of you through the practice's attorney. I don't know if they were delivered. The attorney said it might be better for everyone if I just stayed away. That my presence might be more triggering than healing." "I never got a letter," I said. "I think we both know why that might be. Attorneys protect their clients, and you were a liability. Sending letters admitting wrongdoing probably seemed like a bad legal strategy." She looked down at her coffee cup. "You're probably right." Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "Look, I know what Emma did was wrong. I'm not defending that, but she's shown me how much she's changed. She's a different person now, and I think she deserves a chance to prove that to you, too." "A chance to prove it how?" I asked. "By continuing to date my son. By inserting herself into my life permanently. What exactly is the end goal here?" "The end goal is for us to be a family," Emma said softly. "If Daniel and I have a future together, which I hope we do, then you and I need to find a way to coexist peacefully. I'm not asking you to forget what happened or even to fully forgive me. I'm just asking you to let me show you that I'm not that person anymore." There was something almost pleading in her tone, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of doubt. Was I being unfair? Was I letting my trauma color my perception so much that I couldn't see genuine change and remorse? But then I thought about Sandra's information about the pattern of boundary violations, about how good Emma was at making herself seem vulnerable and sympathetic. This could all be performance carefully calculated to manipulate both Daniel and me into accepting her. "I'll need time," I said. "Finally. I can't just flip a switch and trust you because you say you've changed. Trust is earned and you have a lot to make up for." "I understand," she said. "I'm willing to do whatever it takes." We spent another hour talking, or rather, Emma spent an hour answering my questions while Daniel watched us both anxiously. She told me about the therapy she'd done, the way she'd worked on her tendency to avoid difficult emotions by shutting down or lying. She told me about the additional training she'd sought out, the mentorship from senior nurses who'd helped her develop better protocols. She showed me letters of recommendation from supervisors, patient satisfaction scores, every piece of evidence she compiled to prove she was competent. Now, it was impressive, I had to admit. If I were judging solely on her recent performance, she seemed like an excellent nurse and a person who genuinely worked on her issues. But I kept coming back to the fundamental deception. She'd had countless opportunities to be honest with Daniel, and she'd chosen lies every single time until she'd been backed into a corner. As we were leaving, Emma touched my arm gently. I know this doesn't mean much right now, but I want you to know that I genuinely care about Daniel. I'm not using him or trying to hurt him. He's the best thing that's ever happened to me, and I want to be worthy of him. Then be worthy by being honest, I said always. Because the moment you lied to him about anything, even something small, you prove you haven't changed at all. She nodded, and I thought I saw real fear in her eyes. Fear that I would be watching, waiting for her to slip up. Good. Let her be afraid. Let her understand that she didn't get a free pass just because my son loved her. The next few months were strange and tense. Daniel brought Emma to Sunday dinners again, and we all pretended things were normal. I asked about her work. She asked about my students. Daniel told stories about his projects. We were performing normally, but the foundation was rotten. I watched her constantly looking for signs that she was reverting to old patterns. I paid attention to how she talked about her patients, how she handled stress, whether she took accountability or made excuses. And frustratingly, I couldn't find anything obviously wrong. She seemed genuinely good at her job now, genuinely committed to doing better. But I also noticed other things. Small things that probably wouldn't have registered if I wasn't looking for them. The way she steered conversations away from certain topics. The way she'd sometimes correct Daniel's memories of events, subtly reshaping his perception of their relationship. The way she tracked my reactions, adjusting her behavior based on what she saw in my face. She was still performing, still managing everyone's perceptions. Maybe she'd gotten better at her nursing work, but she hadn't changed the fundamental thing that made her dangerous. She was still someone who prioritized her own comfort and security over truth. In March, Daniel casually mentioned that Emma had asked him to move in with her. Her lease was ending, and it seemed silly to both pay rent when they spent almost every night together. Anyway, he told me this over the phone, probably because he didn't want to see my face when I heard it. That's a big step. I managed to say neutrally. Yeah, well, we've been together almost a year now. Feels right. A year. A year of lies and performance and carefully managed revelations. A year of Emma working her way deeper into my son's life while I watched helplessly from the sidelines. Have you thought about what happens if things don't work out? I couldn't help asking. Untangling your lives will be complicated once you're living together. Mom, please don't do this. His voice was strained. I thought you were trying to accept her. I'm trying, I said. But I'm also your mother and I worry. That's what mothers do. I need you to trust my judgment, he said. I'm not a kid anymore. I can make my own decisions about my relationships. You're right. I conceded even though everything in me wanted to argue. I'm sorry. If moving in together feels right to you, then I hope it works out beautifully. After we hung up, I cried for the first time since this whole situation began. Not angry tears or frustrated tears, but deep grieving sobs for the loss of the close relationship Daniel and I used to have. Emma had driven a wedge between us, maybe not intentionally, but effectively. Every interaction now was filtered through the lens of her presence in his life, and nothing felt natural anymore. I called Sandra and asked her to stop monitoring Emma. I couldn't keep investigating someone my son was building a life with. It wasn't healthy and it wasn't fair to Daniel. If Emma was going to hurt him eventually, it would happen without my help in uncovering it. Spring turned to summer and Daniel and Emma settled into their shared apartment. He sent me photos of their place, asked my advice on furniture arrangement, invited me over for dinner. I went, played the role of the supportive mother, complimented Emma's cooking, and pretended my heart wasn't breaking. Then in July, everything shifted again. Daniel called me early one morning, his voice tight with stress. Mom, I need to talk to you about something. And I need you to promise you'll just listen without making it about Emma's past. My hands went numb. Okay, I promised. Though I already knew whatever he was about to say would be exactly about Emma's past. There's been an incident at her work. A patient filed a complaint about Emma mishandling his medication instructions. He ended up in the ER because he took double the dose he should have, and he's claiming Emma told him to do it. Oh God, I breathe. She didn't, Daniel said quickly. She showed me the documentation. She clearly wrote down the correct dosage and instructions. The patient apparently misread what she wrote, but he's insisting she verbally told him something different. But he's filing a formal complaint. I said that means it goes to administration, maybe to the nursing board. It's all ready. With administration. They're investigating. Emma is on temporary leave until it's resolved. How is she handling it? He was quiet for a moment. Not well. She's terrified. Mom, she keeps saying this is going to ruin everything she's rebuilt. That people will find out about her past and use it against her. And he wanted me to feel sympathetic. He wanted me to put aside my concerns and support Emma through this crisis. But all I could think was that maybe Sandra had been right. Maybe Emma had gotten better at hiding her mistakes, but she hadn't stopped making them. What do you need from me? I asked carefully. I need you not to say I told you so. I need you to believe that Emma didn't do what this patient is accusing her of. And I need you to help me figure out how to support her through this. I closed my eyes, torn between maternal instinct to comfort my son and the deep conviction that Emma was exactly who I'd always known her to be. Even if she hadn't directly caused this incident, the fact that it was happening at all suggested she hadn't changed as much as everyone wanted to believe. Tell me what you need me to do, I said. Finally. Can you come over tonight? Emma is barely eating or sleeping. She needs to see that the people in her life believe in her. So, I went. I sat in their apartment and watched Emma fall apart in a way that seemed genuine. She cried and talked about how unfair it was, how she'd followed every protocol correctly, how one mistake, not even hers, was going to destroy everything. Daniel held her and looked at me pleadingly, asking without words for me to say something comforting. The investigation will show the truth I offered. If you did everything correctly, you'll be cleared. But what if they don't believe me? Emma asked. What if they dig into my background and decide I'm not trustworthy? Then you deal with it, I said more sharply than I intended. You face the consequences and you keep moving forward. That's what adults do. Daniel shot me a look, but Emma nodded slowly. You're right. I can't control what they decide. I can only control how I respond. For a moment, I felt something close to respect for her. Maybe she really had learned something about accountability. But then she looked up at Daniel with those tearful green eyes and said, I don't know what I'd do without you. You're the only thing keeping me together right now. And I saw it clearly, the dependency Sandra had warned me about. The way Emma had made herself so central to Daniel's identity that he couldn't imagine abandoning her. Even if the evidence proved she'd been lying all along, she tied herself to him so completely that untangling would feel like losing a part of himself. The investigation took 3 weeks and they were the longest 3 weeks of Daniel's life, which meant they were also mine. He called me almost daily with updates, his stress palpable even over the phone. Emma had stopped sleeping entirely. She'd lost 10 pounds. She was having panic attacks. And through it all, Daniel was her rock, her support, the person who believed in her when no one else did. I bit my tongue through all of it, wanting to point out that Emma's distress seemed performative, that she was using this crisis to bind Daniel closer to her, but saying so would only push my son further away, so I listened and made supportive noises and waited. The investigation results came back in mid-August. Emma was cleared of wrongdoing. The patient had indeed misread the written instructions and had admitted he hadn't paid close attention when Emma verbally reviewed them with him. His complaint was dismissed with a note in Emma's file about the incident, but no disciplinary action. Daniel was elated. He called me immediately to share the news. His voice lighter than it had been in weeks. She's been vindicated. Mom, they confirmed she did everything right. She can go back to work. I'm glad it's resolved, I said. And I meant it. Whatever else Emma was, she didn't deserve to lose her career over a patient's mistake. I know you had doubts, he continued. But this proves that she really has changed. She handles her job professionally now. This could have been a disaster like last time, but it wasn't because she's learned from her past. I wanted to argue that being cleared of one accusation didn't erase a pattern of behavior. I wanted to point out that 3 weeks of watching Emma manipulate him through her crisis had confirmed all my worst fears about her. But he sounded so happy, so relieved that I couldn't bring myself to dampen it. I'm happy for both of you, I said instead. They celebrated that weekend with a small gathering at their apartment. Just a few close friends and me, everyone toasting Emma's vindication and her return to work. I watched her accept congratulations and sympathy. Watched her lean into Daniel's embrace. Watched her smile at me across the room with something that might have been triumph. She'd won again. She'd been tested and had emerged unscathed, and in the process had made Daniel even more committed to defending her. I was the only one who saw the performance for what it was, and that made me the problem in everyone's eyes, including my son's. As the evening wounded down and guests started leaving, Emma cornered me in the kitchen while Daniel was saying goodbye to friends. "Thank you for being here tonight," she said quietly. "I know you didn't want to come." "Daniel wanted me here," I replied neutrally. She studied my face for a moment. "You still don't trust me. Even after I was cleared, even after I've done everything you asked. You were cleared of one complaint." I said, "That doesn't erase your history or change the fact that you built your relationship with my son on lies." "I never lied to Daniel," she said. And there was steel in her voice now. "I didn't tell him everything immediately, but I never lied. Lies of omission are still lies." I countered. "And you're still performing right now, still managing how I perceive you." "Maybe I am," she admitted, surprising me. "But not because I'm manipulating Daniel. Because I'm terrified of losing him, and you're the one person who could make that happen. You're his mother. Your opinion matters more than you realize." "Then give me a reason to support you," I said. "Show me that you're capable of putting his well-being ahead of your own." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "That's what I do every day. I make myself smaller, quieter, less than I am because I know that's what it takes to keep peace between us. You think I don't see how you watch me, how you're waiting for me to fail. It's exhausting, Katherine. But I keep. The doctor says it's really happening." "I'm on my way," I said, already pulling on clothes. The drive to the hospital felt surreal. I was about to become a grandmother. Despite everything, despite all my concerns and fears about Emma, I was going to meet my grandchild today. That reality overshadowed everything else, at least temporarily. I arrived to find Daniel pacing the waiting room looking pale and terrified. He hugged me tightly, and for a moment we were just mother and son again. No complications or conflicts between us. "How is she?" I asked. "In pain but managing. They're saying it could be a few more hours." He ran his hands through his hair. "I don't know if I'm ready for this, Mom." "Nobody's ever ready," I assured him. "But you'll figure it out. That's what parents do." We waited together, and for those hours in the hospital, the rest of the world fell away. It was just us waiting for this new life to begin. Daniel told me about his hopes and fears, about how he wanted to be a better father than his own had been, about how scared he was of messing up. "You're going to be wonderful," I told him. "You're kind and patient, and you love deeply. That's all any child really needs." At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, a nurse came to get Daniel. Emma was ready to push. He looked at me suddenly uncertain. "Should I ask if you can come in?" "This is between you and Emma," I said. "I'll be right here waiting." He disappeared through the doors, and I settled in for what I knew might be a long wait. But 45 minutes later, he emerged, cradling a small bundle, tears streaming down his face. "Mom, meet your granddaughter, Lily Katherine Morelli." He'd named her after me. My middle name given to this tiny person who just entered the world. I felt my own tears start as he carefully transferred her into my arms. She was perfect, tiny and red-faced, and absolutely perfect, with a dusting of dark hair and fingers so small they barely wrapped around my thumb. I stared down at her. This innocent life born into such a complicated situation, and felt something shift inside me. Whatever happened with Emma, whatever darkness lived in her past or present, this child was blameless. She deserved to be loved and protected, deserved to grow up in a family that put her needs first. And I would make sure she got that, no matter what it cost me personally. "Can I see Emma?" I asked. Daniel led me to the recovery room where Emma lay exhausted but radiant. She smiled when she saw me holding Lily. "Thank you for being here, Katherine." "Thank you for including me," I replied. "She's beautiful. You both did an amazing job." For that moment, looking at this new mother and the baby she brought into the world, I felt something soften in my chest. Maybe we could make this work. Maybe for Lily's sake, we could all find a way to be family despite our complicated history. Emma reached out and touched my arm gently. "I'm glad she'll have you in her life. Every child deserves a grandmother who loves them as fiercely as you love Daniel." It was a peace offering, carefully worded and sincere sounding. I accepted it with a nod, choosing in that moment to believe in the possibility of new beginnings. But as I looked down at Lily, sleeping peacefully in my arms, I also made a silent promise to her. I would protect her from harm, no matter where that harm came from. Even if it came from her own mother, because that's what grandmothers do. We watch, we wait, and when necessary, we fight. And I had a feeling this fight was far from over. Lily turned 2, thriving and perfect. Then Emma's hospital launched another investigation. Missing medication logs, her signature everywhere. This time, security footage existed. Daniel found the truth before I did. Emma had been diverting painkillers for months, falsifying records just like before. She'd never changed. He left her that week, filed for full custody. The nursing board revoked her license permanently. At Lily's 3rd birthday, Daniel squeezed my hand. "You tried to warn me. You weren't ready to hear it," I said, watching our girl blow out candles. "Some people never change, but some families survive them anyway." We did. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.